Hi guys, welcome to my seminar on the evolution of the catch, where I'll be discussing the changes in catch position of the snatch and the clean and jerk. I'm going to start by talking about the changes in snatch catch technique that we've seen over the years. So originally, the split snatch technique was a more commonly adopted variation of the catch position that we used to see, and now it's more regularly to see a more squat snatch position to finish the lift. So for me, there's a few differences in terms of the split position and reason why it may be adopted. I'm going to put those in turn. So firstly, obviously the athlete repositions their pelvis, and I think the reason this is actually what that does is you don't require as much flexibility to lock the bar overhead. And also to get under the bar. So with a split position, you're able to you're requiring less, for example, thoracic extension and less hip flexibility, as what you tend to see in the split snatch is you don't have to go quite as low as you would in the squat snatch. Also, there's an element of balance, I think, that comes into it, where the wider base of support makes it easier to balance, stabilize the bar, but also your own body. Um, but with that comes an inefficiency, as far as I can see, where you're spending, with the split snatch that is, a long time in the air, and during that time you're not able to pull on the bar, you're just almost waiting to come back down to the floor. And finally, with the squat snatch recovery position is going to put the majority of athletes in a position where they're going to be able to recover with the most weight possible, because they're able to use a lot of their squatting capacity or their lower limb strength capacity, and this position is going to be more biomechanically advantageous to utilize this capacity. However, that is dependent on the movement capacities we mentioned earlier. It's also worth noting that if you look at the athletes that have or do adopt a split snatch, certainly the older videos that we saw playing, it seems to be that these are athletes who have quite long femurs and quite long lower limbs compared to their upper torso, which again would suggest that this sort of strategy would allow them to get under the bar quicker, not require as much flexibility, mobility, and quite simply they don't have to go as far to catch the bar. Moving on to the clean and jerk, which has seen almost an opposite scenario in terms of catch position. Historically, we've seen athletes use the split position much more frequently in the clean and jerk finish, and now more increasingly, you're starting to see more of a squat jerk finish position. So the difference with this technique then, being the squat jerk, is compared to what I mentioned earlier with the reasons why athletes previously utilized the split snatch technique where there was a deficiency in some areas in terms of capacities. The difference in this scenario, however, is rather than athletes being deficient, these are athletes with an abundance of capacities in the areas we mentioned. So athletes with tremendous flexibility through the upper back, shoulders, and hips, as well as what I mentioned earlier, where, as we can see here, the split jerk, you spend less time off the ground. Lastly, the athlete puts himself in a position where they're able to utilize their squatting capacity to a greater degree, as well as these being athletes who have to move a shorter distance because generally they are shorter athletes that perform the squat jerk. I will just briefly mention the split jerk. If we look at the two lifts together, for me the split jerk is performed much quicker compared to the squat jerk position, which I think is because you have to move out of a deep squat position in the squat jerk, which means moving the weight a greater range. This might suggest that athletes who use the split jerk technique are utilizing a different strategy compared to the squat jerk, where they're relying more on execution of the skills, speed on the bar, coordination. Considering the seminars that we've been watching in terms of skills and capacities and differentiating between the two, I think that a lot of that rings true here, where all things being equal, in my opinion, an athlete will be able to recover with the most amount of weight, be it the snatch or the clean and jerk, if they adopt a in the overhead squat position. However, all things are not equal, and dependent on the affordances that the athlete has available to them, will dictate which technique they adopt to finish both the snatch and the clean and jerk.